Hello, my name is Brian Fraser, and in this video I'll be showing how to create a REST API using Spring Boot. This follows along from a previous video where we created an initial Spring Boot project that simply put up a Hello World message. So what we had completed previously was a single, I'll show the code here, a single controller with a single endpoint of hello that was returning just the string hello world. And now when I switch to my console, we can see that I'm just getting that, and that's the message I'm getting back. Okay, so from this point, we now want to add in a whole REST API. So let's go through that. I'm going to hit Shift Escape here to get rid of the bottom window. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build a little system here to pledging to vote. So if someone can submit their own pledge that I'm going to vote in the next election, because we all know that when you vote, your vote matters and your views matter. So let's start off here. I'm going to right click on that, say new. I'm going to build a new package. And so I've already got a controllers package inside of this. I'm going to build a new one called model. And inside of the model, I'm going to create a new Java class called pledge. And the things I want on this, I want a private long ID. We'll see that we need this for managing things. And then I'm going to have in here a private string, the person's name, and a private string statement. And we'll allow them to put a statement in as to what they're going to vote for or why they're voting. And I'm going to say alt insert here. I'm going to build a constructor. I'm going to first off just hit Control Enter and get an empty constructor. Alt Insert, give me another constructor for everything if I wanted it. I'm going to hit Alt Insert again, and I'm going to get getters and setters, selecting all of these, Control Enter, and I now have all my getters, all my setters for the obvious way. So this is my plain old Java object. Note that if I was using some sort of hibernation framework, persistence framework like Hibernation, I'd have to mark this as an entity and so forth. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stick with plain old Java as much as I can, just bringing in the REST framework. Okay, so now that I got my pledge, I'm going to close that because I don't really need it anymore. Let's come back here. Let's start working with it a little bit. So we're going to add in a new message to start with. So let's bring in this idea of an endpoint of /pledges is going to be what we're working with. So I'm going to create a new post to start with so we can actually put it in here. So I'm going to have post mapping, and I give it the path that I want to kind of support for my endpoint. And now I can say public. I'm going to return when you successfully write to this endpoint. I'm going to hand you back what it is you just wrote, because I'll updated the ID and that kind of thing. So I'm going to return a pledge, and it's going to call, let's call it create a pledge. The names of these methods don't really matter. They're just a hint to me as the user as to what's going on. And I want to basically take in an argument for the pledge. So I'm going to say, well, given the pledge from the user, this is what I want to do. I've got this variable here, and this has to come from the HTTP request that's coming into me. And I'm going to encode the pledge that the user is sending me inside of the body. So to do that, I can simply put into here and I want to put request body. That's all I need to do. Now I'm going to just sort of figure out my logic. What I want to do is, well, first off, I'm going to need to store these somewhere. So I'm going to have a private list of pledges. Let's call it pledges equals new array list. That looks good. And it's doing the automatic imports for me, so that's that dancing around of all the inputs on the top. And the other thing I'm going to want to, well, we'll come to it in a minute. So I've been handed a pledge. I want to add it in there. So I could simply go pledges.add on my pledge and be 90% of the way there. The next thing I want to do is I want to return a pledge to make this compile. So I can say return pledge. Now, the one extra thing that I'm missing, though, is the ID. Each of my pledges, let me go back to that. Each of my pledges has an ID, and this is going to be assigned by my system. So I want to override that, and so I'm going to say, let's put a comment in here, set pledge to have next ID. So I want to say pledge.setID to some value. Well, it turns out I can do something here. I can use an atomic what am we going to call it? An atomic long. So I'm going to say private atomic long, and I'm going to call this one next ID equals new atomic long. And that'll do me. And this will simply ensure that between threads I'm not getting kind of mixed up if this is running on multiple threads. So I can say here, this is going to be next ID dot, and I'm going to use here, just making sure I get this right, increment and get. So it's going to hand me back the current one, and it's going to move to the next one, and then get that value. Okay, let's try it. So I can hit, if I've already got it running, I'm going to say Control F5, and it's going to redeploy it. Make sure you don't just tell it to run and run and run additional times, because like you can with other apps, if you try to run this app twice, the second instance is going to fail because the port's already in use. So I did Control F5 to rerun it. And now, well, I can go back and prove that my server is up and running by doing the get hello. That's fine, but now I want to actually do the post. And so I can do, well, I can type it in here, but I don't really want to keep typing these in. I'm going to copy and paste this for the moment. I'm going to come back over here and create a right-click new folder or directory, and I'm going to call it docs. And inside of docs, I'm going to create a new file, and this is going to be curl commands. So put a comment on this, read hello. There's my curl command. The next one is add new user. So for this, I'm going to want to do curl. I'm going to do -i, so I'm always seeing the headers. I'm going to add a -h here for adding my own header. And I'm going to say the content type is going to be application /JSON. Anytime I'm actually sending data, I need to put this in, so all my posts have to have it. In fact, I love it so much, I'm going to put it on all messages. There's no harm in having it always being transmitted. So we're always going to put it in here. And then I'm going to do a X. I'm going to send a post message. And then -D to provide the data. I'm going to put a single quote in here to start off my my JSON, and I'm going to put in a tab here just to keep it nice and simple. And in here I'm going to put in whatever I need to send, but we'll get that in a second. I'm then going to want to write to localhost :8080, and I'm going to be writing to pledges. So the data I want to send is, I want to send, I'm not a new user, pardon me, this is a new pledge. So when I want to send a new pledge, let's look at what the pledges look like. Get rid of the server at the bottom here. So a pledge has these two fields. When it gets converted into JSON, name and statement are going to be the two things we care about. So let's just fill it in. So name is mapping to a name. Let's give it a name, Honest Harry. And then I need a statement. And my statement is going to be something like, I vote to change the world. And that's a good start. So I'm just going to now, I can copy and paste this into my terminal. I can middle click on a lot of terminals and it'll paste whatever's in my copy buffer. We see here it comes back with a 200, meaning a success. And then here is the JSON encoded object I just created, and let's see here we've got ID 1. I can do the whole thing again. I say give me another one, and ID 2. And let's just go see here and change this. So I can change the planet. And now we've got ID 3. So we got 3 of them running here. So that's good. Let's go back over here, and I'm going to give myself a little more screen space. I'm going to move this to a separate view. And I'm going to get rid of a few things I don't need. I don't need the application because we don't ever come back to it. Okay, so here in my controller I need to add some more things. Now that I can create them, let's go and actually find them. So I'm going to add in here a get mapping on, again, pledges. So I've got the same endpoint location. I'm just doing a get and a post. So this is going to be a public. It's going to return back, in this case, a list of pledges. So a list of pledge, and it's going to be get, I'm going to call it get all pledges. I don't need any arguments for this, I'm just going to return it, so I can just say return pledges. So let's try that. I'm going to Control F5 to run it. And let's write our command here. So it's going to be the same as this one up here. Oops. I'm going to split it up onto multiple lines so we can see it here. I'm going to put a slash here so that when I copy and paste it into my terminal multi-line, it all comes in as one line. I don't want to do this to hello. I want to get on pledges. So list all pledges. I'll copy that. Server's running. Come back into here, paste it, and I get an empty array. I get an empty array because I'm not writing to a database. The data that's stored in my array list gets blown away every time, so it's empty. I just reran the server. Let's go through here. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to create, let's create two different, or two rather similar or same statements, pledges, and I'm going to go back here and I'm now going to get them. So I'm doing the get on pledges. And here we can see that it's now, well, this looks a little ugly, but we can see we're opening up an array for JSON. I'm closing the array for JSON down here. Here's my first record for ID 1, and here's my second record for ID 2. Now that's fine. I can laboriously go through these, but JSON's great because it's like nearly readable, nearly human readable. What I want to do is, there's a way that I can make these called pretty print. I can pretty print JSON. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but let me just drop the code in that does it. So into my controllers package, I'm going to copy and paste some lovely code I found online. I'm just going to say here, paste. I call it make pretty print JSON just to keep it clear what it's actually trying to do. Let's have a look at what it's going to do for me. It's going to exploit the Spring framework for doing dependency injection, and all I need to say is, hey, I am a web model view controller configuration support. I implement that, and it's going to pretty print JSON. And all of the code in here I don't really care about because it simply does what it needs to do. I found it on Stack Overflow or something. In fact, I say here, yeah, I found it on Stack Overflow, therefore it must work. Let's try that again. So I'm going to go back up here. I'm going to re-add two. So I just added two new pledges, and I'm going to now list the pledges. And now when I list it, it just pretty prints it. You can find all this code on GitHub. I'm going to upload the final project there once I'm done, so you can pull that code down yourself if you like. Plus, I've got the link to the initial source. Okay, let me get rid of that because I don't want to see it again. Okay, so we're coming along. I can now add and I can list them. So that's maybe kind of good enough to start with. We can actually start to get into some more interesting ways of manipulating this. So let's say that I want to get back a single pledge that I've already created. I could list them all and pull it from there, but sometimes your client just wants a single pledge. So I'm going to have a get mapping on pledges, and I'm kind of coming up with this on the fly. I'm going to say, well, I want to access my pledges. So the common way of doing that is saying under pledges, do it by ID. So I put it into the curly braces. That's a token that's going to expand, and I need to then kind of provide where that's coming from. So public, I'm going to get back a single pledge, and get one pledge, I'm going to call it. Now, I need in my Java to be able to access that ID that was sort of here in the URL that I'm building. So in order for me to do that, I say, well, this is actually, I want a long, I'm going to call it long ID. Oops. I can do wrapper or not, doesn't matter. I need to specify where this is coming from. It somehow has to map magically to that token here. It doesn't automatically do that, so I have to say this is going to be a path variable. And this path variable is going to be related to the ID above. So just to keep things, I'm going to rename this variable here. I'm going to call this one, let's just rename it here, pledge ID. Just to show that they're actually different, we do need to have this mapping. Alright, so now what I need to do is just find the pledge I'm interested in. So for each pledge, if I was using a map or something like that, a hash map, I could just look it up. I'm using an array list to keep things simple. So I'm going to say for each pledge in pledges, if pledge.getID is the same as pledge ID, then we've got it. we're good to go. Return the pledge. So that's kind of gets us most of the way there. Except what if it wasn't there? What if the user asked for something that we don't support? So I'm going to, down here, we'll see kind of what to do to complete this. But I'm going to throw a new, I could return null, but that doesn't really indicate failure. That's just we didn't return anything. It feels like the server didn't do it at work. In fact, let's just do that to start with. Return null. Saying, okay, I couldn't find it. I'm just going to hand you back null. Hit Control F5 to relaunch the server. I'm going to go here and I'm going to rewrite a new one. I'm going to create my new command, get one pledge. And I'll just copy and paste this to start. I want to get a pledge, and I'm going to get pledge, let's get pledge 2. Server's up. Again, if I do I'm going to do a list to start with, get all pledges. Again, we're back to no pledges because it's an in-memory data structure. I'm going to toss in 3 different pledges. I'm going to relist them here just to see what we got. Here's my list of pledges I just put in there. And now I'm going to get a specific one, pledge 2. And there is pledge 2. We know it's that because it's got the ID. I could go through and create different ones if I wanted to. Now let's test it out. Let's say if I ask for pledge 100. It tells me, okay, all's well, don't worry, but no body. No body here because I was returning null. So that's not necessarily a huge bug, but that's sort of like it feels like the server said, okay, here it is, and gave me nothing. Let's make it actually seem like an error. So instead of returning null, I'm going to throw a new, I didn't say I was going to throw anything, so I'm going to make it a runtime exception. So a new, let's just do an illegal argument. Illegal argument exception. And that's a good start. So I'm going to Control F5 that. Come back over to here. And launch. And here now it's giving me a nice kind of verbose thing. Every time there's an exception that's an unhandled exception from my server, it comes back with some information. It says, well, there was a illegal argument exception. We're going to fill this in a bit more later on with a message here, and we're actually going to switch it from 500. 500 means server error. We're going to flip it over to a 400, meaning that the server doesn't have a problem, it's your request that had a problem. Okay, so we're getting pretty close. The one other thing I want to do is be able to edit a pledge that's already been submitted. So I could use a put. I'm just going to stick with post because it's easy. Post will do it. Put would not be a bad idea either. So I'm going to do a post here on pledges /ID, and I'm going to say public. I'm going to return back the pledge that has been edited, and I'm going to say edit one pledge. I need that same variable I had from before. In fact, I'm just going to copy the rest of this code because we're probably going to redo most of this. So I've got the one path variable here. I'm going to put this out like this so I got a bit more room. And the other thing I need to do is I'm trying to edit one, so I need to have, well, something coming in. So here I'm going to say I want a request body. Again, just like I did before, it's going to be a pledge. And I can call this one new pledge, just to differentiate it from the other pledges I might have in my code. Now, at this point, I got to be a little bit careful as to exactly what I'm going to do, because, yeah, well, let's just see what's got. So here, instead of returning just the pledge, I don't want to return it. I want to overwrite the current one. I could somehow, once I found my pledge to overwrite, I'm just going to say, well, pledges.remove. If this was a hash map, I'd simply overwrite it, but I got to remove it, and I'm going to remove pledge. And then I could say pledges.add my new pledge. Again, most of the way there, there's just one small thing that I'm overlooking. That's that this new pledge may not have the right ID. Whatever's coming in from the user may not have specified an ID right, and in fact, I never want to let the client code specify the ID for me. So I'm going to say here, because then they could say, well, now this is switching the IDs or overwriting something else. I want to maintain control on that. So I'm going to say, well, let's actually set that. So new pledge dot set ID, and I happen to know what this ID must be. It was in the URL. We're calling that pledge ID. So I can overwrite that. All right, so let's come back here. We'll write the code for that. So I got one pledge, and I'm going to have here, I'm going to change one pledge. So this is a post. Let's just go back up here and copy and paste the post. And what I want to do here is I'm going to switch this one to something like little Lucy. And Lucy is going to vote. I vote for the future. I vote for the future. And we're going to say we're going to post it to, let's do it number 2, just so we can kind of see what's going on. So this is going to be my client. Let's Control F5 to rerun the server. And let's start testing the error. So I'm going to try first off by executing this command when there's nothing there. So it should come back with an error, and in fact it did. Internal error. That's fine for the moment. We'll fix that in a moment. Let's go, and we're going to go and create some new pledges. Add a new pledge. I'll add a bunch of these. Let's go and list just to see what we got. Got a bunch of pledges here, and now we're going to overwrite it. And I've got that. Let's actually just copy it. Why not? Change one pledge. So we came back with a 200, meaning great. And let me list them all again. Here we're going to list them all. Now they're out of order because it's an array list. We pulled one out and put a new one in. That's all right. It's down here at the end. Okay, so we've kind of built out our REST API. There's one more or two more things that I want to kind of fix up here that I'm not particularly happy with. And that's this HTTP 200 that was coming back in two different places. So if I tried to do this pledge to some unknown place, it says 500. That's server error. No, I don't want a server error. This is a client error. So I can in fact do what's called an exception handler here. So at the bottom of my controller, I can say create exception handler. And this is going to basically map any exception that would otherwise bleed through my interface I can handle here. I can do a lot of things. I could switch it to a new exception. I could create my own custom message, a new page. I'm simply going to do kind of the easy way and say, well, I want to handle, let's start off with at exception handler, and then in here I specify what exception. Well, I've got an illegal argument exception is the one I really want to handle. .class I have to specify here, and public void bad ID exception handler. I'll give it a name that kind of tells me what it's doing. I don't, in fact, need to do anything in the body. What I need to do is up here add one more annotation, and that's going to be a response status. And I say here value equals, HTTP status, and I want the status. I can see all the different statuses that I can choose from here. I'm going to say bad request. That's just a 400. That's good enough for me. And I can provide a message, so let's do that here, just to make it, give it a little more. I can say reason equals request ID not found. Put a comment here, nothing to do. So all exceptions that would otherwise bleed through my interface, which are of type illegal argument exception, will now be caught by this. and we'll, instead of generating a 500, we'll generate a 400. And so we're kind of adding semantic value to that HTTP return. Let's try that. So Control F5 to rerun the server. I can execute the same command before on an unknown thing, and it comes back here with status code 400, and 400 we can see up here. So that's good. Now we're using the status codes correctly. The one other status code I want to change is actually for created. If you look up for all of the different codes, there's one for created, not just an OK, but a created. So I'm going to add a pledge. Here's the code to add a pledge. It comes back with currently a 200, pardon me, instead of, there's a one for specifically a created. So let's go back up and find that code. So we're doing the post to the pledges, create new pledge. And on this one, I can say, well, let's make this one response status again. And I don't need to provide a reason. I just say HTTP status. I don't want to say accepted here. I want to say created. So I'm going to save that, run that. Server's back up. Now when I create it, where's it going now? So here we go, a 201. So we're correctly returning the right semantic value on that. Okay, so that concludes all that I wanted to show here. A couple kind of directions to point you in. You might want to fairly quickly get away from using your own data structures like this, and you might want to start using a database. They have in-memory databases, or you can do something like MySQL for persistence. So that would be a very good way. So look up persistence with Spring and Spring Boot would be the next perhaps logical step to continuing with your investigations. Look in the comments below, and I will have a link to the GitHub project that will have all of the code that you see here. Thank you for watching.